Hello and welcome to another video in the Blade series. I'm John and this is Scott. This week's topic is, have antivirus? You can still be hacked. North Korean hackers successfully commandeered the HTTP servers used by the antivirus provider eScan. They did this by exploiting the unsecured connection. The attackers were able to push malicious updates directly to user devices.
Yep.
Basically, they turned a security tool into a weapon against its own users.
Yeah, John, in cybersecurity, there isn't a set it and forget it solution.
Right.
Maybe back in the days, like in the late 90s or something, we were able to set stuff. They'd only look at it once a week or so, but that has changed because everything's moving all the time. And so digital defenses that businesses and individuals rely on are not immune to the tactics employed by cyber criminals. So security is not just about the tools. And that's what people think a lot of times. Cybersecurity is just a set of tools that you install on your network and that's fine. But it's not. That's just one factor that's part of an effective cybersecurity management system. So you also have to worry about the software and how it behaves, right? You also have to have good training for your users and these sort of things. That's some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Okay, cool. And that's a big thing. For businesses, this means recognizing not only the true defense as a proactive measure, right? It's dynamic approach to cybersecurity, and that is actually a specialty of Blade.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's important, especially with the market we work with. It's more the small to medium folks, and there's not necessarily someone that's overseeing all this going down. Like, for example, in the world of antivirus and malware, a lot of the smallest customers that we work with, they don't have anybody looking at these things. They're just turned on, right? And they automatically come down. So if something terrible happens, like the issue we're talking about today, or CrowdStrike, which happened a couple weeks ago, and nobody knows what's going on, and there's a problem. So that's why, we have to understand that there's multiple components we're going to have to look at to have a good, secure cybersecurity program.
Cool. And that's one of the things as we delve deeper into the implications of this breach. We'll explore the importance of continuous improvement and expert intervention in cybersecurity. Okay. So I guess we probably should get into the weeds a little bit on this one.
Yep.
What happened to eScan?
Sure. What happened with eScan was back in April of 2024, a few months back, there was a North Korean hackers got a hold of the security of eScan, which is a anti-malware provider, and they were able to inject some of their own code into what eScan pushed updates down to people. Right? You've probably seen this before with antivirus, anti-malware, really with any software. It wants to update itself periodically. And eScan, like a lot of other vendors, they use what's called essentially a dictionary type setup where they do all their research and they know, okay, these are all the fingerprints of these different viruses. So we're going to bundle that up into a dictionary and we're going to send it off to all of our users. So that's the idea. And they were using HTTP protocol, which is insecure. HTTPS is the one you're probably more familiar with. Right. That's the one that puts the little lock on your browser and everything, meaning it's secure. But this particular vendor was not using that. They were using HTTP unencrypted, right, to push those down there. So then, once the hackers got control of eScan systems, they were able to put inside of the regular updates their own little malware that would go out to systems and grab data, collect it, and so on and so forth. So, this was a pretty serious breach because all these customers who thought they were getting updates to protect themselves were getting that, and they were getting something they didn't really want, which is a bunch of malware.
So that's a good one. So this brings us to the question, what are the vulnerabilities of antivirus software?
Right. Well, that's one. Antivirus is always, for the longest time in the 90s and early 2000s, antivirus software was really the extent of your cybersecurity to a certain extent. That's all you had if you're old enough to remember back in the day. You got antivirus? Okay, you're protected. Fine. Well, that's not really the case. You have to have more of different approaches, a suite of different types of software, and so on and so forth. So, eScan, this vulnerability shows that it's just also what we saw with CrowdStrike a few weeks back, where you really have to trust and vet your vendors and make sure that they are doing things the right way to protect yourself. Don't just go by, whatever they happen to say is this is how we do our backups or restores, or this is how we push things down there. Test these things and make sure they're really happening like you think. So some of the things in antivirus software, some of the vulnerabilities that you have to look out for is the update mechanisms. Now, if we're going to go way back into like the early 90s, pre-internet, we had to update our antivirus programs manually. You have to go around to every machine with a floppy, right? And update the thing. So, that was something that was pretty secure. As long as you trusted the update, you were a trusted person with a floppy disk to a machine that only you could access and so on. So, pretty secure. But now, as the internet has evolved, networks have evolved, and the vendors are starting to use that more as a transmission mechanism to get these updates down to you, which is a great idea. However, if they're delivering them in an insecure manner, it can allow third parties to get in there and add their own little special spice right into that download, and it cause you potentially have problems. Another issue with antivirus, and really with a lot of cybersecurity software in general, is that it's very complex, and as systems get more complex, they're more prone to having strange little problems and glitches that, as the software becomes more complex, the problems become more complex as well. So that's something to watch out for. Also, it runs in high system level privileges. It usually runs as a system level or administrator level account, which means they can do anything they want to that machine. So that's something to keep in mind with as well. Another technique that antivirus tools use is something called heuristics. And this is something that evolved over time. Well, first off, we had originally just had these dictionary files that we would put into our systems and update them, so they had a dictionary and know what to look for so they could identify a virus. But of course, the bad guys got smart about that, and this whole area actually is a complete cat and mouse situation. It has been for the last 30 years. The bad guys figure out something, the good guys fix it. The bad guys figure out something, the good guys fix it, right? It's over and over and over. And heuristic was one of those ideas where we were kind of using AI, quote, quote, early AI, machine learning type stuff to be able, the system would watch and see if a piece of code was doing things that was weird, like trying to send files out to the internet without permissions or these sort of things. That's called heuristic. So the software itself had some sort of intelligence to be able to say, hey, that doesn't look good. Stop that right now.
Yeah. Well, as you're going through this, I was sitting here thinking, well, I'm sufficiently terrified, and and it really brings to light some of the scary reality of cyber threats, right? And so, let's talk a little bit about the digital landscape and what that looks like, because it's basically a battlefield.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a battlefield. I mean, the bad guys are constantly trying to find a new vulnerability in our existing software. They're always looking at Microsoft Windows or the components of Microsoft Office, or big stuff like you see with SQL servers and these sort of things, trying to find a vulnerability that the program vendor doesn't know about yet so they can exploit it. Those are called zero-day type vulnerabilities, where the vendor has not been able to get a patch out quick enough to stop some terrible thing from happening. And it's a battlefield. There's so many different vectors of being attacked. I know we talked before we came on today about back in the early 90s, there was a program vendor who had this new software for Macintoshes, the antivirus for Macintoshes, and they were handing out a floppy disk at a trade show. And everybody took the floppy disk back to their Macs, put it in there, and what do you know? It found a virus every time. Well, as you can probably guess, there was a virus on the floppy that they didn't know about, so they distributed this around and everything. So that was a very interesting thing that happened. But what we saw with eScan, this is a more part of a larger trend of increasing cyber threats. And what we need to do is we got to be proactive about this, because the bad guys aren't dumb, right? They know that cybersecurity is really important to all of us right now. So they're going to use whatever they can to be able to access those cybersecurity tools we use to protect ourselves, to turn it into weapons against us. So that's just something we have to be on top of day to day. Remember, the bad guys only have to be right once. We have to be right every time.
Yeah. And so, and that's a great point. So we've basically reached a point in time when active cybersecurity is become a necessity, not an option.
Absolutely.
And it comes down to, but we go back to the set it and forget it thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even the smallest business, that if you're out there, you got to have somebody who's responsible for the cybersecurity ends. Maybe that's somebody you have to be lucky enough to have somebody in house that can do that for a few hours a week and keep an eye on these things. Or maybe you need to go with a consultant route and get somebody that keeps an eye on it for you remotely, these sort of things. But the idea, as John mentioned, of set it and forget it, it's outdated, it's naive. That's not the way it is now. It's got to be dynamic. It changes every day. The landscape changes every day. I know I spend hours every day just keeping track on what's going on and where the potential big threats are coming from. You can't stop them all. And also to remember, as we're going to talk about in a bit, on how we can layer our security to mitigate these things, your biggest threat of all is and always will be the end users. They're the ones that are going to be, that's your attack surface, right? That's where the bad guys are going to try to come and get. So they're the ones that are going to be your biggest threat. But you can also, with proper training and such, make them your best remediation. They can catch these things before you even know it, perhaps. But it's an ongoing process, is the point, and it needs attention and adaptation pretty much on a daily basis.
All right, so you take your biggest threat vector and turn it into a layer of the security, and that leads us into, let's talk about how we can layer security to help mitigate these risks.
Sure.
How about adding continuous monitoring in it?
Well, that's important. I mean, you have to monitor what's going on in your network so you know what's going on. You have to monitor what the users are doing, what the systems are doing. And I'm not saying you have to employ somebody to sit there and stare at a monitor for 24 hours a day, watching who's going to what website and that kind of stuff. Not talking about this. With the evolution of artificial intelligence and machine-based learning type approaches, you can gather that data and have it go through an AI filter, so to speak, and only see the things that are most important to you. So out of the millions of different events in your network, maybe there's 4 or 5 that look a little hinky, and the system wants to have you, a human being, take a look at it and make sure that's what's going on. So continuous monitoring of all this is so important. You also have the proactive surveillance. When you think there's unusual behavior, you need to make sure there's no breach going on or getting ready. Maybe this is just reconnaissance by the bad guys. That happens too, just to see how far they can get in. There's also different hacker groups. That's what they specialize in. It's just to see if there's a vulnerability, and they'll take that and they'll sell that to another hacker group that actually goes forth and maybe pushes malware or ransomware or those sort of things. So people also need to make sure that you're keeping all these cybersecurity pieces updated all the time, and not just cybersecurity, but Microsoft Windows patches. Got to have them. Office patches. Anything with the Adobe suites. Any other big program vendors that provide these patches. Make sure you're up to date. They're just not trying to make themselves busy, right, by writing these patches. They write these patches because there's a vulnerability, and you have to prevent these exploits. And most times, this patch is the only way you're going to stop this. So that is really what your attack surface looks like, and that's really what some basic things you can do to make your business and yourself more protected.
Yeah, so try not to leave the doors open, is what he said. And so when you're talking about this type of person, something that comes into my mind is what type of person could keep up with stuff like that?
Yeah, see, that's tough. But you have to be a specialist in cybersecurity, or have that be one of your core competencies, because it's just become to the point now, it's so complicated. The errors are so subtle in nature. There's so many new things going on that you have to have a person on staff or a trusted advisor, consultant that can help you get through these minefields. Because I know we saw, again, just to talk about CrowdStrike, a few weeks back, we had a couple of customers that were in trouble with that. We were able to recover quite quickly because we had our tool sets in place. We understood their cybersecurity environment. So they were down maybe an hour or two, unlike someone like Delta that was down for, weeks? Are they still up? I don't even know. They had a bad week. But anyhow, so working with a cybersecurity professional, they're going to understand the landscape of cyber threats, what tools are out there. And I tell you, there are more cybersecurity tools than you can shake a stick at, and they're coming out all the time. And somebody has to take the time to vet them, see if they work as advertised, at least in these sort of things. And that's why, companies like Blade Technologies, we have security specialists, and that's what we do. As we keep track of these things, we're always looking out to give good advice to customers. And we work with customers from the C-suite to help them with strategies and so on, all the way down into the trenches where we're doing risk analysis and, any sort of risk assessments and these sort of things with the IT staff that's on staff. So, there's a lot there. There's a lot of ways that Blade can kind of fit in and help you meet those gaps that you might have in your cybersecurity area.
Yeah, taking a more holistic approach.
Absolutely.
So that there's no part of the network infrastructure that's left unprotected.
Right. And that, I know I see that a lot, especially in larger enterprises, is that you have your cybersecurity department is separate from your infrastructure department, maybe separate from your desktop department. Right. So there has to be good communications between those departments for this to be effective. Otherwise, you're just increasing your attack surface.
Right.
Right.
And then you've got a lot of noise that no one's paying attention.
Exactly. And that's why you mentioned a holistic approach is the only way to do this effectively.
Yep. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about some essential steps that businesses should take to enhance their cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. No, these are types of things you don't have to be a Bayer or Boeing or somebody like that to be able to take advantage of. These steps are pretty basic for any size company, even your mom and pop type shops all the way up to enterprises. And first thing is you have to understand where you're at in the continuum of safety right now today, and you have to do security audits and risk assessments. And that's a process that no IT pro enjoys because it takes a lot of time to go there and dig and try to find all the bodies that you can find on your network and figure out how to remediate them. But a lot of people are scared because it's the whole fear of the unknown.
Yes.
They're afraid to see exactly how bad it is, and that's a terrible approach to take because it's not going to get better on its own. And security audits and assessments are not a static thing. It's an ongoing, never-ending process. And you basically do your audit, you look at your assessments, you determine where the gaps are, you fill the gaps, then you re-audit over and over and over. It's the only way to be sure because the cybersecurity environment is changing constantly. And the threats are numerous and always changing. So we can't rely on our audit from last month to be a reflection to what's true today. So that's what you want to do with that. A second thing is employee training. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest cybersecurity threat is and always will be the end user. Always. Because human errors are the weakest link in security. Social engineering, it works great. I know I do a lot of it's one of my areas of study myself. Social engineering just basically is being a confidence person and talking your way into places and talking somebody into giving their password over the phone to you. And we do it all the time. And you'd be shocked how often if you come in there very confident and say, give me your password, I'm from IT, that people will give it up. And that's the kind of stuff that people need to understand. I know when we do training, we don't hang anyone out to dry as an example. We try to make everything a positive environment. We do training here too. It's even though we're involved to it up to our necks every day, we have to be sharp on maybe the types of attacks that we personally haven't seen and new type of stuff that comes out. You may have heard of like the CEO scams where a bad guy gets on your networking and start looking at all the different email going back and forth. And over time during that reconnaissance period, they can determine, okay, John's the COO and Scott's the CEO and Jennifer writes all the checks and John's going to Thailand today and he's getting ready to get on a plane. So let's send a quick email coming from John saying, hey, I forgot to tell you, you have to pay this right now. Send $250,000 to da-da-da-da-da. Yep. And okay, now you can't get a hold of John. He's in the air, which nowadays you can kind of get a hold of people. But then what you have is Jennifer, the clerk, is sitting there going, okay, do I listen to what my boss said or do I wait?
And you got the fear factor.
Yeah.
Like the fear of authority. Like they want to please their authority.
And it's usually written such as do it now or, or we're in big trouble. Yeah. So that is that call to action, go do it. And, we've worked incidents before where that has happened, where big checks were written and money was never recovered out of that. And that's why education, just by training people, because in this case, all Jennifer would have to do would be to say, call Scott, who's the CEO, and say what to do, or these sort of things. Or just pick up the phone and call somebody, or just wait. If you're not sure, trust your instincts. Really, that helps the most. People who start double thinking themselves and so on, they're the ones that get in the biggest trouble generally. So the third thing that you really need to have is an incident response plan. And no matter what size your business, again, a mom and pop shop should have an incident response plan. Now, it doesn't have to be 300 pages long. It can be on the back of an envelope to get started. Just something, what to do if this happens. And just that way, because if you're in a stressful situation, you're going to make errors unless you have some sort of checklist to work off of. And it makes people calmer and so on and so forth. You also need to drill these things. Okay, we're going to walk through our incident response plan today, and we're going to pretend like we just had a ransomware attack. I know that's something that I run these exercises, tabletop exercises with clients saying, okay, here's what happened today. What are you going to do? Next step. you're going to pay them or not? What are you going to do?
Well,
these sort of things.
And you've even done one here. I've got pictures, which I'll eventually put those up.
Okay.
Where we're all sitting around and you're actually running the event for us. So it's not just you guys. It's everyone needs to take that onus.
Yeah, and it's important. And you can get a lot of free resources from Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Office. Those folks, they have a lot of freebies that you can use and that you can adapt to your own environment. But it's something we try to do with most of our customers, annually. I like to do them like quarterly. They don't have to be a whole day. Last one we did with the bank, I think it took me like 2.5, 3 hours from beginning to end. And we found all kinds of problems, and that was good. That was the whole purpose of it. We want to find where the gaps are so we can fix them. Fear of the unknown is the biggest fear of all. Yep. So, really, one of the last things you can do is, once you've done these other things, is have a partnership with cybersecurity experts already established. The thing is, if there's a big cybersecurity event that affects everybody, which is coming, it's going to happen, there's going to be a lot of people calling a lot of different cybersecurity companies looking for help. And if you have an existing relationship, you're going to have a much better chance of getting some help when you really need it. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, in my personal practice area, I work with C-level down IT admins to the end users. Because for me, every portion is just as important as the other. As we mentioned, the end users are the biggest threat. The C-level folks are the guys that need to make sure these audits and stuff happen, that we know where we're at. So everybody has a role. I always go in, whenever I do cybersecurity type seminars and such, one of the first questions I ask is, okay, how many people in the audience here are responsible for cybersecurity? And all their hands should go up, but maybe like a third generally, right? About a third or so people. We're all responsible for it, and that's what's so important. So that way, you get yourself a partner lined up. I know, like with Plate Technologies, you can get to know us. It's not like you're gonna have to write us a big check or anything, but we get to know you, get to know your environment. So when it happens, you've got a trusted advisor who understands your environment, who can help you out of the ditch as quick as possible. So another thing in the same vein, things we've talked about kind of throughout this whole discussion today is updating and patching systems. And that is something that's super important. Do you know in your company how that's done? If not, and if you're a C-level person or a business owner, you better find out, because this is one of the easiest ways to protect yourself, and also one of the easiest ways for the bad guys to get in. Because when you're getting a patch, that means the program vendor knows that there's a problem with their software that could cause issues, and they're trying to fix it for you. Bad guys know the exact same thing, so they're going to try to take care of that exploit before you can patch it. So you got to have a process in place. It should be automated as best as possible. You also want to make sure you audit these patches to make sure some, for whatever reason, just doesn't apply. It happens. And that way maybe there's some manual intervention and these sort of things. But it has to be done. You got to make sure it's done. I mean, it's really, in this list, maybe step one of making sure that, everything is up to date. Because if not, you're just asking for it.
Yep. And so I think the moral of the story is secure your business against cybersecurity threats.
Yep.
And we'd like you to do it with Blade, if at all humanly possible. So the recent incident with eScan antivirus, it showcases the continually evolving landscape. It serves as a potent reminder of the vulnerabilities that can exist even within systems designed to protect us. And this makes it essential for businesses of all sizes to adopt a proactive and comprehensive approach to cybersecurity. It's really about safeguarding your digital assets and maintaining trust with clients.
That's a big one.
From everything that we're talking about. And so from Blade's perspective, we utilize a holistic approach, like we talked about. We offer a suite of tailored services that go way beyond mere defense to ensure your business is not only prepared to handle the current threats, but it's also equipped to anticipate and mitigate future risks.
Right.
So that means, choosing Blade means adopting a cybersecurity partner that understands the complexities of the modern digital landscape. And unlike generic cybersecurity solutions, we offer customized solutions that align all the stuff we've talked about with the specific things that are going on in your business.
Right.
So anyway, from endpoint protection to network security and beyond, Blade services cover all things as a unified defense across your entire digital infrastructure.
Right.
And it's one of those things, while no cybersecurity plan is an absolute guarantee, we're just out to mitigate the risks. I think the key is, if you're not doing something proactive and you don't have a plan in place, engage with someone or try to educate yourself on how to do it. But I would say engage with someone, like you said, because we both know we've been doing this a long time. He's been doing it longer than me, but even in the past 5 years, it's been an education for me to even come up to where I can understand you.
Well, I mentioned, I spend a couple hours each day, probably spend 14, 16 hours a week, just trying to keep up on all the new developments and evaluate that and so on. So, yeah, it's becoming a tougher and tougher job for a single individual at an organization to do this on their own without some expert help from the outside, or, an assistant on the inside, so one person can learn stuff, the other one can do the day-to-day, that kind of thing. But it's something to certainly be considered. It's essential as a accountant or a lawyer. Having those professional relationships is having one with a cybersecurity practitioner at this point.
Yeah. So I guess the moral of the story here is start your journey, gather your experts, and just try to put yourself in a better position than you were yesterday every day.
I think that's great. I mean, that's absolutely true. It's an incremental approach. You're never going to get really ahead of the curve because the curve's moving so fast in front of us that we're just trying to keep up.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And start your journey. Start with a plan on the back of an envelope, what to do in case of a big incident, and get some people that can help you, understand what are the best things to do for your particular enterprise.
Well, thanks for joining us, Scott. Thank you for your expertise,
Pleasure.
as always.
Thanks, John.
And thanks again. This is Blade, Jon, and Scott. Take it easy.